Have you ever felt like you're just one small piece of a much bigger puzzle? Well, today we're going to open up the toolkit that actually lets you see how that whole puzzle fits together. It's called sociology, and trust me, it's not just some academic subject, it's a whole new way of looking at your own life. So, let's jump right in.
Here's what we've got on tap. First, we're going to get our heads around one single idea that changes, well, pretty much everything. Then, we'll check out 3 really powerful lenses that sociologists use to view the world. And to tie it all together, we're going to point those new lenses at something we all know pretty well: food.
So what is this big foundational idea? Well, it all kicks off with a question that kind of makes you rethink how you see your own problems. Okay, think about it for a second. When a student drops out of college, our first instinct is to think it's a personal issue, right? Maybe they didn't hit the books hard enough, or it just wasn't for them. But is that the whole story? I mean, what if it's happening to thousands of students all over the country?
And that right there is where the sociological imagination comes into play. This is a game-changing concept from C. Wright Mills. It's all about connecting what he called our personal troubles to bigger public issues. So that student dropping out, suddenly it's not just their problem. It becomes part of a much larger conversation about things like skyrocketing tuition, a tough job market, or deep inequalities in our education system. It's about seeing the threads that connect your life story to the story of society itself.
Now, to really use our sociological imagination, sociologists have 3 main frameworks. I always think of them like different lenses for a camera. Each one gives you a totally unique shot of the world. We've got functionalism, conflict theory, and symbolic interactionism. Let's start by looking through that first lens.
Okay, our first lens is functionalism. And it asks us to imagine society not just as a bunch of people, but as a living, breathing organism.
A thinker named Herbert Spencer really pushed this idea. He said, look, social institutions like family, school, government, they're just like the organs in a human body. Each one has a very specific job to do, and they all have to work together to keep the whole thing, society, stable and healthy. You know, it's all about order and balance.
But wait, it gets a little deeper. Another sociologist, Robert Merton, broke it down even further. He said these social functions come in different flavors. You've got your manifest functions. Those are the obvious intended results. You go to college to get an education, right? But then you have latent functions, the unintended but still important side effects. You know, like finding your future partner in a class. And when things don't work out as planned, like students getting buried in debt, well, Merton called those dysfunctions.
Now, no theory is perfect, and functionalism has its critics. The biggest issue? It's so focused on stability, it really struggles to explain social change. I mean, if everything is supposed to work together in perfect harmony, why do things ever fall apart or radically transform? And that question? Well, it leads us straight to our next lens.
All right, let's swap out that lens. If functionalism is all about harmony, our next perspective, conflict theory, is all about the exact opposite: competition, power, and inequality.
From this point of view, society isn't some cooperative body. Nope, it's an arena. It's a place where different groups are in a constant tug of war over limited resources. We're talking money, housing, jobs, you name it. And those social institutions like the government or schools, they're not seen as neutral. They're actually the tools that powerful groups use to maintain their lead in the competition. Of course, the big name here is Karl Marx. He saw basically all of human history as a story of class conflict. But other thinkers built on that. Max Weber said, sure, it's about money, but it's also about power and social status. And George Simmel had a really interesting take. He argued that sometimes conflict can actually be a good thing, bringing people together to fight for change. So what's the downside here? Well, the big critique of conflict theory is that it's kind of one-sided, just like functionalism. It's so laser-focused on conflict and change that it sometimes forgets how incredibly stable our societies can be. So both of these big macro theories are super useful, but they're not the whole picture. What if the real action isn't in these huge structures, but in our simple, everyday interactions?
Okay, time to put down the telescope and pick up the microscope. We're zooming way in, from the giant structures of society to the tiny, micro level of our daily lives. This is symbolic interactionism.
This whole perspective is built on the idea that society isn't some massive thing that happens to us. It's something that we, you and I, are actively creating every single day through our conversations and interactions. It's all about how we use symbols, everything from words and hand gestures to clothes and cars, to build a shared reality and figure out how to act. Sociologist Herbert Blumer really nailed it.
Just think about a simple stop sign. Is it just a red piece of metal? Of course not. Through all your interactions with parents, with driver's ed teachers, you've learned that it means stop. We give things meaning, and then those meanings guide how we behave. We are literally building our social world, one interaction at a time.
A really fun way to grasp this is through Irving Goffman's idea of dramaturgical analysis. He basically said that all of social life is like a play. We're all actors on a stage, and we're constantly managing our performance, our words, our clothes, our body language, to present a certain version of ourselves to our audience. And we're constantly changing roles, right? One minute you're a student, the next you're an employee, then you're a friend at a coffee shop.
So we have these big picture macro theories and the super up-close micro theory. So how do sociologists actually go about studying all this stuff? Well, as it turns out, they need very different kinds of evidence for the wide-angle shot versus the close-up.
And that gets us to the difference between quantitative and qualitative data. The big macro theories like functionalism and conflict theory, they love quantitative data. We're talking statistics, surveys, census info, huge data sets that can show us large-scale patterns. But the micro-level theories like interactionism, they're all about qualitative data, things like in-depth interviews and detailed observations, which give you a much richer understanding of what an experience actually means to someone.
But this micro-level view gets some pushback, too. The main issue people raise is its super narrow focus. I mean, can you really understand an entire society just by looking at one-on-one conversations? And it also makes you wonder about objectivity. When a researcher is that deeply involved, how do they keep their own biases out of it?
Okay, we've got our 3 lenses. Now comes the really cool part. Let's actually use them to look at something we all deal with every day: food. This is where you really see how these abstract ideas become super powerful tools for understanding the real world.
Let's try it out. A functionalist looking at food would see the whole industry as a vital organ of society. They'd analyze how agriculture keeps the country fed and how it fuels the economy. A conflict theorist, though, they'd see a battlefield. They'd investigate the power struggles between huge corporations and small family farms, or ask why it's so much easier to find fresh, healthy food in wealthy neighborhoods. And the symbolic interactionist? They'd zoom in on a single family dinner, exploring what that shared meal actually symbolizes, or how food is used in religious ceremonies. See? Same topic, 3 totally different and totally valuable insights.
And that brings us full circle, right back to the beginning. Because the real power of sociology isn't just learning a few theories for a test. It's about using that sociological imagination to see your own life, your own world, with fresh eyes. So I'll leave you with a question to chew on. What's a personal experience in your life, your job, your education, a challenge you've overcome that might just be connected to the bigger social forces that are shaping all of our lives?